So
I'm really excited to talk to you. And they're like, oh my god, like, there's like a slight, not to be super rude about it, I was like, oh, there's a slight celebrity element to this now, because I'm like, oh, you're the captain of the TRUK team.
I mean, just for that game, now that we've got so many players, we should probably like actually discuss it rather than Lucy going, right, Arthur, you're doing it.
So it was just like all right, you be captain for this one.
Yeah, so me and Lucy, when I played for their all-gender team, she took me aside after it and was like, I want to try and get a trans-mass team together, and if we do manage it, would you be captain? I was like, yeah. So like it was decided like 9 months before before the game.
Cool.
So now that we've actually got people that want to play regularly, I think we should do it more democratically than...
Do you know if it's like now going to be something that's being planned across the country, or is it still very London based?
So we've got a few games lined up already. So there's one on the day of Eurovision, so I'm not playing, in Nottingham, and we've got one the day after Trans Pride Brighton, so that hopefully people will stick around to watch that, because we're playing nothing nearby. I don't know how close Lansing is to Brighton, but it looks relatively close on the map. And then we've got one against my usual team as well, but that is in London. But Lucy's, because we're based on Slack, she's like segregated people off into locations, so hopefully people will be joining like five-a-side teams, leagues, in their area. So we've got quite a few in Leeds, so hopefully there will be enough to get a team together.
I'm going to go back to the beginning, which is actually like, can you just like introduce yourself with your name and a little bit about what you do or what your hobbies are? I'm not going to force you to talk about work if you don't want to. It's something that you like.
Yeah. Okay, so hi, I'm Arthur Webber, I'm 25, my pronouns are he, him, and I work in social media in the charity sector, and my hobbies really are just football now. It's kind of taken over my life since I moved to London, which is not a bad thing, because I like football and football.
I'm glad that you like your hobby. That's very important. Cool. Just starting like way at the beginning. How did you get into football?
So I've sort of always been into it. Like my dad used to referee, and his dad used to referee, so it's always been like in my family. My mum likes to jokingly blame me being trans on my dad, making me watch the 1998 World Cup as a baby, because I think I was like 2 months old, and she was like, that trans. So yeah, it's always been a huge part of my life. I didn't start supporting a team until I was 6, because my dad never imposed who he supported, because Ipswich and they're dreadful. But when I was 6, it was the Invincible season, and a boy in my class who I quite fancied supported Arsenal, so I was like, okay, I'll pick that one then. And I've stuck with Arsenal since, so it's been a long time, and we're finally doing quite well. So
I fully, for X amount of years, just supported Manchester United because of Bend It Like Beckham. That was like my whole reasoning behind it. I'm like, what's your team? I'm like, I didn't even grow up in England. So I watched this movie and it was pretty gay. So what am I supposed to do? Cool. So like, how many different kinds of teams have you played on? Like, have you played? Cause some people I've talked to played in mixed teams before they were like 11, and then they went into gender teams after that. Is it similar?
Sort of. So I played for a local boys team when I was about 7, but that was just because my dad knew the coach, and so he didn't mind having me around. As far as I'm aware, he never got any stick from any of the other boys. I personally didn't, so hopefully the coach didn't either. And then for my school, primary school, it was mixed. So, and then when I moved to secondary school, it was you had to be on the men's or the women's team, and I had to go for the women's then, unfortunately.
Did you? Because there's a lot of overlap, I think, between conversation around trans inclusion and inclusion generally, and in this case also inclusion for women in sport. When you were playing on the women's team versus when you were playing on boys' teams, what did the support for the teams look like? Were they relatively similar, or was there a difference in financial support, people turning up to games, quality of pitch, all kinds of things like that?
So for the women's team, there wasn't an awful lot. I remember being in year 7 and I was playing for the year 9 team, just they couldn't even get enough girls to play for that team. I like to tell people at times, because I was so good that I got into the teams, no, it's because they didn't have enough people. We only got the guy who would drive our minibus, who would come and watch the games, and no one else did. Whereas when I was playing for the boys team, at least everyone's dad would come down and watch. So it was different.
I guess then fast forward, because we've played as a kid, and now we play playing as an adult? When did you start playing as an adult, and what was that experience like?
So I only started playing as an adult a year ago when I moved to London, because being from Peterborough, there wasn't anything pretty much for LGBT plus people at all, let alone specific LGBT plus sports spaces. The closest team was Leicester, and they did invite me to come and play, but they trained on a Wednesday night, and they didn't finish until 9, and the last train back from Leicester was before 9, so it just wouldn't have worked. But at least like knowing that team was there meant that when I was discussing moving in with Dan, my partner in London, it was like, okay, that should be a priority for me, is getting back into it, because I now know that there are teams out there that I could join. So I've been playing for Left Footers for coming up to a year and a half now.
What kind of a team is Left Footers?
It's an LGBT plus inclusive team. It is mainly cis gay men. There's like me, a trans woman, and a non-binary person, and that's it in terms of not being cis gay men. Actually, no, there is one bisexual male. Everyone else is.
Is that do you feel like, not to make you like, I'm not trying to make you slag off your team or anything, like, well, I guess actually maybe the question is more like, what do you think might be stopping more like not cis gay men from joining the team?
I think, to be honest, it's just quite intimidating. I know that before I started playing, I was very nervous going back into it, because I was like, oh god, what if everybody's like a foot taller than me, and they've been playing their whole lives, they're so much faster. And I think for a lot of people there is that element in their head of, I guess, assuming what cis gay men are going to be like. My first game that I played for Left Footers, one guy scored 3 own goals, and I was like, okay, actually I'm going to be alright here. So
I love the notion of like in a very positive way, like the notion that somebody is failing as a way of being like, oh, okay, this is actually a good space.
Okay, I'm not going to be the worst here. That's fine. But yeah, I think there's also obviously the worry about changing rooms. Obviously LGBT inclusive technically includes all genders, but do most teams bother having multiple changing rooms to their team? No. I know that a problem that I've been having is that they never, when all the venues are chosen, they never bother to check whether like the showers are cubicles or just communal. So like I never shower after a game, and all the other guys can, because the one that we played at the weekend had had cubicle showers, but because I'm so used to them being communal, I didn't bother to bring a towel or anything, because I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to go, I'm just going to go out. So I think it's just because pretty much everybody is cis. It's not that they don't want to be inclusive, there's just lots of things they don't have to think about, because it's not a problem for them. And so it's just having to remind people, being like, hey, have you thought about this? I think that's another thing that puts people off, because like I was the only openly trans player when I started playing, and it meant having to answer a lot of questions that people have, obviously well-meaning ones, nobody was nasty, but as trans people we know it gets very tiring having to answer the same questions over and over again. And so going into an environment where you know is likely going to be mostly cis men, I think that will also put people off, thinking I'm probably going to be the only trans person, I have to explain my whole life story to 20 different people. Like it is exhausting. I don't mind doing it, but it's not for everybody.
I guess I feel like now I'm going to be making you repeat things that you've had to have conversations about with other people, but like in an ideal space, or like, you know, maybe just like, what do you think that is often perhaps not thought about, that like majority cis men spaces ought to be doing to feel more welcoming to trans guys coming into those spaces, or wanting to come into those spaces but not feeling quite sure, even if it says, you know, gender inclusive or trans inclusive. Like, what do you think that they need to be thinking about?
I think for trans inclusive in general, rather than specifically trans guys, obviously a lot of the language in football is very male coded. Like it's largely changed to assistant referee, but most people use linesman, it's man on. And so for trans people that don't identify exclusively as male, that can be a big problem. Obviously we have a trans woman who plays for us, and trying to get people to, even though they don't think of her as a man, not using the phrase man on, just because they're so used to using it to just mean anybody that's coming towards the ball. Like there's a lot of conversations around like language and culture, rather than necessarily having specifically like exclusionary policies or anything. It's just they haven't had to think about that before. and sort of being the first trans person to come in and challenge that is very difficult, and I understand why people wouldn't necessarily want to be the person to do it.
I just like in terms of, I guess, playing in leagues and playing in matches. Like, how's that experience been for you?
I've really enjoyed it. I was very nervous before my first game, just because I knew that my team were fully on board with the trans thing, but what's the other team going to be? Because again, the likelihood is it was going to be mostly cis gay men, and maybe they'd have one trans person. But no, I've never had any problems at any games, which has been really nice. I suppose the only problem has been not winning very much, but there's been nothing in relation to me being trans that has ever caused an issue at a game.
And sorry, I just wanted to clarify, these have been like LGBT plus inclusive leagues?
Yes, so we play in the GFSN, which is the Gay Football Supporters Network, which is a league across the country of LGBT plus teams.
Alright, here's a slightly vaguer question, so you can answer it whichever way you want. In the much wider football world, what do you think that like queer inclusive policies and trans policies and intersectional inclusive policies, which obviously we're making arguments for, because like the FA rulings are not inclusive, and so like we are talking about trans people, but in a lot of ways that has ripple-on effects, and that also is intersectional by when we're doing it right. How do you think that can benefit the football world at large? And I'm including like straight cis spaces here.
I think the football world at large will benefit from having a more diverse group of people playing. I mean, spaces in general benefit from having different people come in and being able to be themselves. So I think just in general, football should have more diversity in it. You know, the fact that we're celebrating the first, with Jake Daniels coming out, the first openly gay professional player in England and Wales for 30 years, because football has felt that unwelcoming to gay players. And obviously we know there are gay players in the football league, they just don't feel comfortable sharing who they are, and that's a big problem. And he said after he came out, that after he told his mum that he was gay, he went on and scored 4 goals in the next game. And so making sure that it's an inclusive environment has such an effect on people's performance as well. It's not just whether people will come along, because there will be some people that are willing to deal with negative culture if it just means that they can play, but they will play so much better if they are properly included. And I think that's a huge reason to make sure that we have inclusive policies in place.
Yeah, I think as well, like, I mean, obviously, like, I think a lot of us do want to play competitively. I mean, some people, like I've spoken to a mix of people, some people prefer to just be like, I just want to kick about, I just want to be in an active space, I just want a community space. And then some of us are like, I also want to play competitively, and maybe even win sometimes. Who knows? So I'm just going to ask you a really simple question, which is what I was talking about before. What position do you have?
So I usually play left back. When we have more casual games, I do try going like a little bit further forward along the left, but I don't really like to do it in competitive games because I'm not very good at it.
That's not good. I prefer defense, maybe because I get anxious when I'm too far forward. I just don't know what to do. Like I know what I'm supposed to be doing in defense. I'm supposed to stop people coming past me, but then when I am running for what do I do? Like when I had to play as a striker for a little bit at the weekend, like the manager was shouting at the side, "Arthur, run over there!" Because I'm like, I don't know where I'm going. What do I do? I'm not a striker. So yeah, I definitely prefer being in defense. Did you score goals when you were a striker? I think maybe that was what they were hoping you would do.
Yeah, but my left footers haven't scored a goal all season, so if they were putting that on my shoulders when I don't normally play as a striker rather than the people that normally do, that's a bit much.
Also, I think the left footers is a great name.
It is that they're a really lovely bunch of people. The away kit is trans pride colours. They're lovely, but just not very good.
I mean, I'd like to win. I find it quite heartening because when I used to play football, and when I used to do sports, I used to do a lot of different sports, I get very in my head about, like, if we lost, it was a personal failing or something. And something that's been really nice about having these conversations that I'm having, and I guess joining queer spaces in a wider sense as well, as being like, oh, okay, that's not. It's not why we're here, but it's not the whole purpose of this.
Yeah.
I think that's just been like, it's making me relax more about the idea of actually playing football again, because it's like coming out and being like, oh, where do I go? Cool. Do you play any other sports?
Not at the moment. When I was at school, I did everything. It's just with now having so much football stuff on, I don't really have time to do any other ones, because I did, prior to all the TRUK stuff happening and everything blowing up, I did reach out to London Royals Hockey Club, because I used to play hockey when I was at school and had been scouted to play for Peterborough, but gave it up like with football when I came out, so I had been interested in going back, but just don't have time.
Fascinating is hockey. I also played hockey, and a lot of people I've talked to have also played hockey. I don't know if that's an English thing, because I wasn't raised in England, so I don't know if I just happened upon something that a lot of English people do, or what that was. Cool. We've kind of talked about this already a little bit, but just kind of, I guess, from a different direction. Obviously, a lot of I'm just going to acknowledge that it exists without going into it, but a lot of the stuff that's being said right now is ignorant and nasty and useless, really, for everybody. So just like, what is it that's important about trans people getting to access sports spaces? The question that I feel like people ought to be talking, like, that's where some of the, like, I think the focus ought to be.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think it was Sport England have done studies into it recently, and like trans people, specifically non-binary people, are so much less active than cis men and cis women, just because so many of us don't realise that there is a space there for us, if there is one at all nearby, because obviously most inclusive spaces do tend to be London based, and not everybody's in London and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just so important, because I think everybody should be able to access sport regardless of what identity there are, and I think a lot of people with all this nasty stuff is very much focusing on elite sport and forgetting that the vast majority of sport is played at the grassroots, where, you know, it's very normal for people to lose 20-0 and for someone to absolutely batter somebody else, or whatever sport it is, because you know, it's grassroots. There is going to be a huge imbalance, and I don't think that should be legislated away just because people are worried about trans people coming in. Like, it's part of the fun.
I think we add to the space, really.
Yeah, we do.
I think we're very good for it.
We are.
Something ecosystems, etc.
Yeah, like I remember like when I used to be a politician, and when I would do talks about trans inclusion in political spaces, and people would ask me about sport, like the argument that I would find myself falling back on was, oh, we've been allowed to compete in the Olympics for 20 years and no one's won anything. But it always felt like a kick in the teeth. Why can't we win something? Why does it have to be that trans people are only allowed to compete if it's certain we're going to lose? Like, no, trans women should be allowed to win. They should be allowed to be great at stuff and not be worried that cis women are going to kick off about some nonsense about biological advantage, because biological advantage is the reason why anybody wins at any sport. Like, that's the whole, you know, Michael Phelps wins swimming because he's massive and has huge feet. Like, that's how sport works. It shouldn't cause such huge controversy just because it's trans people doing it.
I mean, is that like it only seems to be about like women's advantages or disadvantages in a way where I'm like, I think more cis women should be talking about the fact that their bodies are also being legislated, like they're also being scrutinized.
Yeah, exactly.
And and like, yeah, like it's the same issue, just and yeah, I think if maybe there was a different way of talking about sports and what matters in sports and why it is people want to be included in sports. I mean, even the Olympics themselves is something that originally was meant to be for amateurs, and now is like, yeah, we're definitely for amateurs, except in the sense that they're not technically in like a legal loophole considered professionals, but yeah, they definitely have personal trainers. And like, yeah, and it's interesting. I think that like cis straight concerns, I think, are so focused on, I guess, this idea of winning in a specific way that is harmful to their bodies as well. And I think like if they could open up a little bit, if they could think about things from a different perspective, it would be beneficial to all of us.
I think the conversation about cis people actually opening their minds is not just limited to sport, but like everything. Like
oh yeah, I mean in the sense, like basically a lot of what I'm doing with this as well is like football is a microcosm. Like everything that's being spoken about football, other than the fact that like we're also going to be talking about the sport, the sport of football is like, oh, we're opening up spaces, which means X, Y, Z is being talked about, and you know, if we allow air quotes heavily, if trans people are in these social spaces, then we must also be in these social spaces, and we must be included in these political scenes. So it's all definitely acknowledging that. To I guess like let's move it back into football. But what is your favourite thing about playing football?
I don't know, to be honest. Obviously, when I was younger and when I thought like I could be a striker or whatever, it was always like trying to score a goal. Whereas now, I think it's just, I don't know, the camaraderie of it all, getting to try out new stuff, even if, especially with my current team, quite often it doesn't work. But like, at least get to try to do things, try to get better, and obviously keeping active, endorphins, all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know, I think for like when I first started playing, it was very much started playing again after transitioning, it was very much a gender thing. I was like, I want to be in a space that's mainly men, so I can prove that I am a man as well. Whereas now it doesn't even come into it. Like I'll post about it afterwards because I know that trans people need to see that I am a trans man playing in a largely male space. But for me, it's just going and putting a kit on and having a kick about with my friends and losing 12-0 or whatever. It's, you know, it's more about the friendship and camaraderie of it now versus a year ago, wherein it was very much about proving myself.
And how was the match with TRUK, actually?
Well, that was so much. Like, one, I've never been a captain before because I'm not the captain of my current team. I don't think I'd want to be, to be honest. So there was the trying to remember all of the things that I'm supposed to do and not doing them very well. So like, because most of us had never met before, it was trying to get everybody together in the changing room at one time so we could do what would resemble a team talk. And you know, when I fetch one person, another one would wander off to the bar, another one would go to the toilet, and like, get back here now. And then, you know, one guy, Ash from Emmerdale, was driving down from Leeds and got stuck in traffic, and then he arrived 5 minutes before kickoff, and it's like, and then you know, I'd spoken with one of my teammates the night before because he was very nervous because he'd played a couple of casual Sundays with my current team, but pretty much nothing since. But he really wanted to be a part of this, and so he texted me being like, what if our like packers fall out? I was like, I'll just make sure we're wearing really tight pants, because in the previous game we played together, like both of us had forgotten to put tight ones on, and so things were moving and we were like, oh no. But he then tweeted saying that I'd reminded him to put on tight pants, and then when I got to the changing room I had guys coming up to me being like, Arthur, I bought special tight pants to make sure my packet doesn't fall out. And I was like, this is such a unique experience that I don't think anyone else in the world can say has happened to them, which I really loved. But the actual like aspect of being a captain, like, you know, going and doing the coin toss at the beginning of the game, forgot to do that because not been a captain before. I just went to my usual position at left back, and then the referee's going, I'm like, oh shit. And then also before that, everybody had come on to do like a little warm up, and I'd forgotten what the starting lineup was, and the manager had gone to the bar, said, Lucy, please come back. So I don't know how well I did it, but like I'm glad that I did. There were also the aspect of it, like knowing that everybody had such different footballing backgrounds, because we had Parker who scored the goal, who's a semi-professional in the Women's League, and I also knew that some people who'd put in our little chat like a small introduction to yourselves beforehand, some people hadn't kicked a ball since school, and so trying to, in my head, manage it so that everybody would have a good time regardless of what their ability was. And also I'd had a discussion with the manager of Left Footers a few weeks before, talking about how there is this assumption even in queer football spaces that everybody has been like obsessed with football since they were a child and just stopped when they came out, but like still love it and still know all the rules and everything, rather than some people who like maybe played for their school team for a couple of matches at like 7-a-side and don't know anything about 11-a-side. And so like I made sure to sit down and go, okay, who knows the offside rule? And it turns out quite a few people didn't. And so, you know, it's feeling like, okay, managing my own expectations and all of that kind of stuff. But mainly like the main pressure on me was just trying to make sure that everybody had a nice time, because I wasn't going in there expecting to win, because what football team that has never met each other before expects to win against a team that regularly play together, potentially train together? I don't know, I didn't ask any of them, but at least like I scrolled through their Twitter and they at least play together once a month, so that's a huge advantage over us, regardless of, you know, not even considering like actual ability or anything, just having that communication and knowing how each other plays. So it was, in my head, it was about really trying to make sure that everybody had a good time, which I think they did. I haven't had anybody come and say, Arthur, that was dreadful. So
you were terrible specifically.
no, after one of the players for Left Footers came to watch me play in that match, and afterwards Paul was like, Arthur, why didn't you play like that for us? That was the best I've ever seen you play. I was like, oh, sorry.
I heard there was quite a large crowd watching.
There was, I think the final count was 542, like huge number of people.
I'm sorry, I can't even imagine.
Okay.
Did you also have like a lot of like changing in the middle of the match, right? Because you had like a lot of people who wanted to play on the team.
Yeah, I think we had about 18 in the end, including a couple of cis allies who normally play for TRUK's inclusive team, but like we're making sure they weren't included, at least in the starting lineup, because the whole point was it was the first transmass team, and then the allies can come on a bit later on if we need it. And obviously there were some people who were like I think in their 30s who hadn't played football for a while, who definitely weren't going to manage the full 60 minutes, so we definitely needed substitutes and stuff.
Yeah, no, I would not manage the full 60 minutes.
Yeah.
I did these like, I mean, to be fair, they were quite high intensity because it was quite a small pitch we did it on, so we did these like high intensity like 15-minute matches or something, and I was like, I'm dying. I'm also running constantly because it's not like a large field where you can like you have this like space where you're kind of like, this is kind of my area. So yeah, but that would not have worked at all.
Yeah.
Where did you say that one in Brighton was being played?
I think it's Lancing FC. I'll have to check afterwards, but yeah, we wanted to arrange one for Transfer Brighton, just because we knew that most of the transgenders in the country would be there, so hopefully weren't just going down for the day, so might stay for the next day to come and watch us play. I think on the map it looks close by. I haven't checked the actual journey time because I'm not staying overnight in Brighton, because I looked at the hotel prices for like £200 and I was like, no, I'll pay £40, go back to London and then come back again the next morning. That's fine. But yeah, hopefully most people didn't wait until like last week, like me, to have a look and are staying overnight, so there should be some people that come along to watch.
Do you know who you're playing?
Yeah, Brighton Blags, which is Brighton's LGBT plus inclusive team.
I'm going to be cerebral again, or like I'm going to be, I guess, actually not cerebral, utopian. In like an ideal, let's say 50 years or something, what do you think that like the football space might look like in terms of the kind of teams that are available, the kind of leagues that people can play in, things like that?
I mean, ideally, obviously, trans women will be able to play in the women's league, and trans men will be able to play in the men's league, and non-binary people will be able to play in whichever league they fancy, and hopefully there will be more mixed ones as well for people that perhaps don't feel comfortable being in a single gender one or not. But also I do still think that spaces like TRUK should still exist, because there's something different. Like, as much as I love playing with Left Footers and they're all really close friends, I love them to bits, there's something different about just playing alongside trans people that was really special and wonderful, and so I wouldn't want that space not to exist. I wouldn't want it to be the only option for trans people. I want us to be able to play wherever we want, but I definitely think there should still be spaces that are just special for trans people, because there is nothing like playing alongside just a group of people that you know are pretty much exactly the same as you.
Like, ideally the funding will be there for all of these kind of.
Oh yes, 100%, and we won't have to be fundraising for a camera so that people abroad can watch our games and stuff. The funding, hopefully, will be there for everyone.
Did you have to do that?
Yeah, so we haven't been live streaming any of the games up until now, but after the games on Translate availability, just because there was such a huge interest from people all over the world, Lucy set up a fundraiser to raise money for a camera and a subscription to some website. I don't understand the technical bits of it, so that people could watch it wherever they are, because prior to now it's just been okay, people find out the scores the next day when someone logs into Twitter to say so.
I mean, I would have loved to have seen the translated results. But I think there are some clips online. I haven't had like the chance to just sit down and check these things.
Yeah, we had someone there filming it. We just didn't have the capacity to live stream it, so there are, and obviously we only had the one person filming it, so it is just behind one goal, so that's that's the only bit you get to see. So
is it your goal?
Obviously we swapped at half time, so
okay, so you just stayed behind that goal.
Yeah, it just stayed behind that goal, so I don't think it got Parker's goal because we were playing at the other end at that time, so I don't think it got it. But yeah, so to have the capacity to, have multiple cameras, not necessarily like in the Premier League where there's one like every couple of meters, but one either end might be nice.
You can see if somebody scores a goal.
Yeah.
Or hell, saves a goal.
Yeah.
Cool. Would you be up for sharing like an anecdote or even a couple? I had a couple of people be like, I can't choose between this and this, and be like, it's cool, you can tell me more things are better. But just something about football that you've experienced that was cool or surprising or something that like really stuck with you.
Does it have to be playing or just other stuff?
Anything related to football. It can be watching or after a match or.
I think probably the most special thing that I've done football wise is I am in a video that plays at the Emirates Stadium about discriminatory chanting in football, because Arsenal got in touch with Gay Gooners last January to say that for LGBT History Month they wanted to put out a video that there's a shortened version that's just like homophobic chanting is bad, all of that kind of stuff, but there's a longer 5-minute version that explores all of our stories and how we got involved in Arsenal and football in general. And I'm really proud of being able to do that, because I very specifically talk about being trans, whereas some of the other people, I suppose their stories are more to be expected because they're older gay men, and then there's me in my little trans shirt because I didn't own any Arsenal shirts at the time, and Arsenal wouldn't give me one for the video, which is very rude of them. But that was very special. I think they hadn't anticipated that, even though they'd reached out to the Gay Gooners, and the Gay Gooners are an inclusive organisation, not just for cis gay men, but for the whole community, they hadn't anticipated there would be any trans people. So like they were asking me, because I mentioned that I used to play and I'd recently started playing again at that point, and the interviewer was like, what was it like playing, knowing that you were gay and being in the men's changing room? What was the macho experience like? And I was like, well, I played for a women's team when I was at school, and all the faces just dropped, even though I was there in my trans pride shirt. and they just clearly hadn't been briefed that it wasn't just going to be cis gay men that were doing this video. So I'm very proud of doing it. I completely forgot that they were still playing it, and I took my sisters to the North London derby back in September, and I appeared on the screen, so they were like, Arthur, is that you? And I was like, oh yeah, forgot about that, sorry. I regularly get people texting me saying, oh, I've seen your video on the screen, and I think that's really important. I'm very proud of doing that.
I think there's something very funny about them being like, oh, because did they not know that you were trans?
I think they just anticipated they were going to be interviewing, I think, 4 cis gay men and a lesbian, and that was it, and they'd not realised that there are other people in the community.
Block that shot at all?
No, it didn't block it.
Oh, okay.
You can see all of the other all the other people who've been introduced. I think I went last, and so they were all still sitting around, and you could see them all burst out laughing when I said it, because obviously they all knew, they're my friends, but clearly the camera people and stuff had not been briefed on it.
Do you think that there's new opportunities that are arising to be able to maybe as kids and teenagers to enter into these spaces as the genders that they are, and being able to find these spaces, or is that still something that needs to be worked on?
I don't know whether necessarily like while they are kids, but I think like knowing like there being such visibility for TRUK in particular, knowing that there is a team that they can play for when they become an adult is a huge thing. 'Cause obviously, when I gave up when I was 13, I didn't know there were LGBT plus teams out there. I think there were only sort of one or two back at that point anyway. So like not knowing that and thinking you're giving up forever, whereas at least, you know, if you know that there's somewhere you can go when you're an adult, like it's still going to be hard to think that you're not going to play again for a while, but at least you know it's only a while rather than it being permanent. I think that knowledge is really helpful. I've had like parents of trans teens message me since the game saying, I've shown my son what you're doing, we think that's absolutely amazing. He currently plays for his like boys team, whatever, but he's 9 and we're not sure like what's going to happen when he's older, but he at least knows that there's something once he's an adult. And so, you know, hopefully there will be teams out there that are specifically for young people as well. I mean, we have occasionally let under 18s play. There's a trans girl called Emily from Liverpool, who's quite famous online, who occasionally plays for the women's team, but that's mainly because her mum is very close with the TRUK people and there's not so much of a safeguarding issue there as a random child. But hopefully, knowing that there is that level of interest amongst trans kids, just from the messages that I've got, I'm sure Lucy and all the TRUK people have had plenty as well. Knowing that there is that interest, that maybe a space specifically for trans teens can exist in future, but at least there is something for when they're older as well. So
It's happening bit by bit.
Yeah, the change is happening very quickly. I think TRUK didn't even exist 2 years ago, and look at where we are now. Like change is happening so fast, and so who knows? Maybe in a year's time there will be like 5 trans kids teams all over the country, and you know,
Be nice.
it would be nice. But yeah, I think there's a lot of optimism out there. You know, there's like people who had already given up, who are trans kids, who now know that okay, I've only got to wait so many years, and then there's a space for me, and like that's groundbreaking.
And I think we're quite an adaptable people. Like we'll might give up for half a second and then be like, all right, I guess I'm making this space myself. Like.
Yeah, that's true. Like Lucy said that she created TRUK because like she's the world's first trans referee, and after the publicity off of that, people came to her and was like, I want to play football, but I just don't think there's an inclusive environment. And she was like, okay, well I'm gonna make one then. And so like I'm sure that if there are black spots that, you know, TRUK can't reach, that, you know, maybe there's a group of people in Northern Ireland that it's just too far for Lucy to consider having to do, that somebody will pop up and do it. So like yeah, I'm very optimistic that this is very much the start of stuff, and that in future there's going to be so much more things for people to get involved in.
I'm very excited. I mean, like, I'm just thinking about like there's a trans team starting up in Leeds. I think. I mean, I don't actually know if it's related specifically to TRUK or not, because Frank's the person who's involved with it, and I don't know if that's because of him playing with TRUK recently, or if it's because he's just been building to this for a long time. I need to ask him more about that.
I think like TRUK has definitely given him some more connections, because obviously there were a few guys that came down from Leeds that I don't think he knew beforehand, and there are more since that have joined the chat. So I think even if he does pinch them and start his own squad, like the more trans teams the merrier, in my opinion. Like it doesn't have to just be TRUK. Like sure, if we can have a TRUK 5-a-side team in every city in the country, amazing. But if we want to have other teams as well, also great. Like there can never be too many trans spaces. I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I think as well as like the second that availability, I mean we said this already, but just like the second that availability made itself known, people were like, oh okay, I'm signing up for this.
Yeah, literally like before the match on the Slack, I think there were like 80 people, and now there's like 220. Like there's been so many people wanting to get involved, and that's, you know, just people that have bothered to click on the link, because I know that I've sent it to several people who haven't actually joined yet. So like God knows how many we're going to end up eventually getting. I was chatting to the manager of Left Footers yesterday, because Left Footers have a game against TRUK coming up, and he was like, what's the ability level like, so that I know, because he wants it to be a fair game obviously, so he's not going to put out people that used to play in youth academies if, you know, it ends up being a bunch of people who haven't played since school. So he was asking about that. I was like, Carl, I've got no idea. There are 30 of us just in London alone. Like I think there's 2 that played in the original game that are going to be playing in that game. We've got a squad of 18 sorted within 24 hours of posting. Like it's so big, and like he was like, oh, right, well, can you let me know closer to the time? I'll try. But like it's so much bigger than anybody had ever anticipated, and that's wonderful.
I mean, because a lot of the time it's like, okay, change is gradual, and sometimes it'll just be like, oh, okay, this is all happening all at once.
Yeah.
Like within, I don't know, like within a month. I mean, I know there was a lot of build up to it, of course, but like, I don't know. I think it's also just because I'm doing this project right now, so like, this is something that I've been like relatively focused on, and so just to be like, wait, hold on, this was definitely not what was happening a year ago.
No, it's been so fast, and obviously it's unfortunately largely down to Lucy, bless her heart, trying to organise everything. Like I remember, because so many journalists got in touch straight after the game. I was messaging her being like, this person's got in touch and wants a quote from you, and this person, and then like she didn't reply until like 3 p.m. She was like, Arthur, I'm so sorry, I didn't get to sleep till 5 a.m. because I was shipping out hoodies to New Zealand, and I was like, don't apologise. You are such an incredible woman. So yeah, like it's all happened so fast, and I don't think anybody anticipated that anything like this would happen, but I'm glad that it has. Let's start a trans takeover of football, because I know that Lucy's got big plans for joining leagues, because the women's team play in a 5-a-side league at the moment, and that she's got plans for men's 5-a-side leagues, inclusive leagues, 11-a-side leagues. Like Lucy's got a big brain, so.
Again, there's just a couple of questions left, but just like in a sort of vague sense, and you can answer it however you feel like. What do you think that like transmasculine voices are adding, like have the potential to add to this, to the positive conversation?
I think just adding transmasculine visibility is obviously helpful for other transmasculine people, but I think it will hopefully help detoxify some of the debate, because I think your average cis person just thinks that it's only trans women that are interested in playing sport and nobody else, and trans men just, I don't know, sit on the sofas all day and don't do anything. And so obviously lots of us do, I do most days, but by making it clear that it isn't a one-sided thing, and that trans people of all shapes, sizes and genders want to be involved and need inclusive spaces, will help change people's understanding of what being trans is and the whole trans sports inclusion thing, because if they don't have a full picture of what's actually going on, it's very easy, I think, to fall into ignorant understandings of stuff. So being more visible helps both trans people, because hopefully more trans people will get involved, the more of us there are shouting about how there are inclusive spaces, but also cis people will come to understand that it's not about whatever they think trans inclusion in sport is about, because all of them seem to have it wrong.
It's weirdly disconnected, where you're just like I don't know, like I try to avoid a lot of it, because I'm like, it's not really useful in any way, but every once in a while you'll stumble on something and be like, I hadn't even thought of this until you brought it up. And it's I don't know, it's just it's factually wrong, so I don't know what else to say.
Literally, like the cis understanding of trans inclusion in sport is like so far away from what people I say the cis, mainly cis people, because at least like people in queer inclusive spaces sort of seem to have a better understanding. So like the cis understanding of trans inclusion in sport is like so far from what trans people actually want and what we're actually asking for, that it's like, but hopefully visibility will help them to come to understand that the things they're being fed by the media isn't actually what's happening here, and that maybe they should use their brains and question things rather than just accepting whatever Rupert Murdoch decides to force down their throat.
Hey, Rupert Murdoch knows so much, really.
He does. He is the all-seeing eye. No agenda at all, just facts.
As an image.
Spooky.
Spooky Murdoch. Cool. Why do you think, just for fun, why do you think that queer and trans people should get into football, either playing it or as supporters who show up at matches and cheer?
I would say that just queer inclusive football is such a different space to straight football. Like if you've grown up playing straight football, I can understand why as a queer person you wouldn't want to get involved, but like Dan, my partner's family came along to watch one of my matches recently, and they had such a good time because it's so different. Like one of our supporters who comes along to every game because he used to play but he can't play anymore, just shouts stuff from the field because like the banter's still there. It's not like silent, but it's queer banter. So like one of the players like headed the ball off, and the supporter shouted, "Oh Nathan, you give such good head," and like my partner's relatives were pissing themselves because they'd never heard anything like that at a football match, and that's what it's like. And I think there is this kind of fear from queer people that it's going to be sort of queer people in a straight space and we're ignoring the fact that we're queer, and it's absolutely not. Like it's so different, and that's why you should get involved, because we need more spaces that celebrate who we are in football rather than trying to necessarily trying to fit in the spaces that don't want us. So obviously the inclusion work needs to happen to make sure there aren't any spaces that don't want us, but there absolutely are spaces that do, and we are celebrated, and so you should get involved in those.
Sometimes I think cis straight people are really missing out.
They are, like, they should all come and watch gay football because it's so much more fun than straight football.
Cool. We're basically done, but is there anything that you really want to say that you were like, oh, I wish we'd gotten into that subject, and I really want people to know this thing?
I don't think so. I think all that Lucy would really want me to say, because that's the thing that she's been telling to badger home the journalist, is that the stuff that's happened with TRUK is very much just the beginning, and there's all sorts of stuff that I'm currently not allowed to tell you about that is going on behind the scenes, and that hopefully will come out soon. So I should put embargoed next to it when she sent some of the stuff, like, do not say. Okay. So yeah, there's huge plans for the future, and the trans people are going to be able to play football all over the place. It's going to be wonderful.
So exciting.
It is. Like when sometimes she'll just send me stuff about, what do you think about this? I'm like, yes, please do it. So
Well,
yeah.
I know I'm just repeating myself now, but I am just like a little bit. I mean, because like when I started on this, I actually had like a lot of different types of questions in mind, but then after the match, I was really reconfiguring a lot of what I was focusing on, because I don't know, somehow I hadn't even been able to visualize that until it happened. And now it's like, oh, now we're talking about like this game, and now we're talking about the plans we have for the future, and a conversation that is happening out in the open rather than a conversation that we wish was happening.
Yeah, it's incredible, and the fact that it's created a space for so many people as well. Like even so many people on the team. Like one guy I was speaking to plays for a men's team, and he's stealth, and so never mentions that he's trans, and only one other player knows that he's trans. So for him to be able to come into a team of entirely trans people and be able to celebrate it and feel proud of himself was very new. And then for Parker, who normally plays in the women's league, his first ever men's game, playing alongside entirely people like him, which is so special for everybody for so many different reasons. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's been so wonderful. Like for me, one of the reasons why it was special was because, looking back at 13-year-old me, had not seen anything like this. But for everybody to have their own like different reasons why it was so important and why it was so necessary, hopefully it means that more people will get involved and will also have their own reasons. Because I really enjoyed just chatting to everybody before the games and trying to find out their stories, and having so many different backgrounds, and reading everybody sending in their little 200 little introduce yourself messages, like, hi, I'm so and so from this place, I used to play professionally for Scotland or wherever, or I've never kicked a ball before, and I just saw you guys and I want to get involved, and it's just been absolutely wonderful.
Cool. I mean, yeah, that's it. You're good. I'm cool with it. Thank you so much.
It's alright.